Before we begin, this story contains descriptions of mass death, including the deaths of children, and an account of extreme desperation during a disaster. If you need to step away, we understand. Take care of yourself first. Father Peter Pernan stepped out of his rectory at 9:30 on the night of October 8, 1871, and stopped. The sky above Peshtigo, Wisconsin was orange. Not dawn, it was the middle of the night. He could hear something coming from the west, not crackling, a roar. He'd write later that it was louder than any train he'd ever heard. He had maybe 40 minutes. The town had maybe less. You're listening to the Unlit Room. Every story in here actually happened. That's the part that should scare you. New stories every day, Monday through Saturday. Today, the deadliest fire in American history, and why almost nobody has ever heard of it. Peshtigo, Wisconsin, fall of 1871, a logging town of about 1,700 people, wooden buildings, wooden sidewalks, streets packed with sawdust. Father Peter Pernan was the Catholic priest. He'd been watching smoke on the horizon for weeks. The entire region had been in drought since summer. Loggers had been burning slash piles, the cut stumps and branches cleared from the forest, for months. Small fires smoldered across hundreds of thousands of acres. Nobody was alarmed. This was just how the land got cleared. 200 miles to the south, in Chicago, a fire broke out on DeKoven Street on the evening of October 8, 1871. By the following morning, it had burned over 3 square miles of the city. 250 people dead. 17,000 buildings gone. Every major newspaper in the country ran it on the front page. The Great Chicago Fire was the story of the year, maybe the story of the decade. A city in ruins, a national fixation. 200 miles north, in Peshtigo, there were no telegraph lines left standing, no newspaper presses, no correspondence. There was nothing to send, even if anyone had survived to send it. What happened in Peshtigo wasn't just a fire. The prolonged drought, the slash piles, and a fast-moving cold front that arrived that evening had combined to create what the record would later describe as a firestorm, a self-sustaining fire system that generates its own weather. The cold front pushed winds past 110 miles per hour. The scattered slash fires merged, and what crossed into Peshtigo that night wasn't a wall of flame. It was a system. The death toll estimates still vary by more than 1,000 because all the records burned with the dead. But the range is this: between 1,200 and 2,500 people died in Wisconsin that night. Chicago's fire killed around 250 on the same night. Peshtigo was a town built entirely from things that burned. Every building was timber, every sidewalk was timber, the streets were packed sawdust. The town had a factory that made wooden washtubs and a sawmill that ran day and night. By the standards of modern fire science, the entire town was a fuel load waiting for a match. When the firestorm hit the edge of town, citizens had minutes to decide what to do. Most of them ran for the river. What happened at the Peshtigo River is the part of the story that almost never gets told, and the part that changes how you understand everything else. Father Pernan described it in his memoir, written 3 years later. He said the sound arrived before the fire, a roar he felt in his chest before he heard it with his ears. Then the heat. Then the light, which wasn't the light of fire, but the light of everything being on fire at once. Survivors reported fire whirls, columns of spinning flame, lifting railroad cars off their tracks and hurling them through the air. Houses were pulled from their foundations. The temperature at the center of the firestorm exceeded 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt glass, hot enough to combust metal. Many people didn't burn, they vaporized. Hundreds of Peshtigo's citizens ran to the Peshtigo River and waded in, standing neck-deep in frigid water while the firestorm passed overhead. Pernan was among them. He wrote that even submerged to his shoulders, the heat on his face was like standing inside an oven. Some people drowned, others lost consciousness and went under. Others died of hypothermia in the cold water. And here is an account that history has preserved and that needs to be told carefully. In the river that night, at least one man, watching the firestorm close in on the water's edge, watching his children beside him, slit the throats of his children to spare them from burning to death. This is what survivors reported. This is what they witnessed. The fire had pushed human beings to the end of every option they had. Pernan watched the firestorm jump the river, not from below. It used the wooden bridges to cross, and the updrafts carried burning debris high above the water. Both banks caught simultaneously. When the sun came up on October 9th, the town of Peshtigo was gone. Not damaged, gone. The sawmill, the factory, the church, the homes. 16 other communities across northeastern Wisconsin had burned as well. Survivors walked through gray, still smoking ruin, looking for anything they recognized. The dead were everywhere. Relief teams began arriving within days, and that's when they discovered something about these dead that made the disaster worse in a way nobody had anticipated. The fire hadn't just killed them, it had done something else to them. The firestorm had destroyed every record in every community it touched. Birth certificates, census rolls, marriage records, property deeds, the documents that allowed any government, any family, to say this person existed, had all burned. More than 350 bodies were buried in a single mass grave outside Peshtigo because there was no one left alive to identify them. No one knew their names. No one knew how many there had been. The 1873 Wisconsin legislature report listed 1,182 names of dead or missing, but investigators acknowledged at the time that the actual toll was certainly higher. How much higher? No one could say, because the evidence was ash. There's a question about October 8, 1871, that fire scientists and historians have never fully closed. The same night that Peshtigo burned and Chicago burned, fires also broke out in Michigan, in Manistee and Holland. 4 major fires across 3 states in a single night. The consensus scientific explanation is the cold front. The weather system that drove the Wisconsin fires was large enough to spread dangerous conditions across the region. But in 1883, a man named Robert Wood put forward a different theory. In 1985, a writer named Mel Waskin revised it. And in 2004, a paper submitted to the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics made the case again. Fragments of Biela's comet, a comet that had visibly broken apart in the 1860s and was expected to pass near Earth in 1872, may have seeded fires across the Midwest. The comet theory isn't accepted by contemporary fire science. The blue flames that appeared in basements across both Peshtigo and Chicago, cited as the most striking anomaly, are now understood as carbon monoxide burning in oxygen-starved spaces, a normal byproduct of any large enclosed fire. No meteoritic material has ever been recovered at any of the sites, but no one who hears this detail forgets it. 2 fires, same night, same blue flames in the basements, 200 miles apart. The scientific debate has largely settled, but the fire left something behind that hasn't, something historians are still, right now, literally finding in the ground. Mass graves from the Peshtigo fire are still being discovered. New burial sites have been documented in recent years as development in northeastern Wisconsin disturbs old ground. Historians still can't agree on how many people died. The Wisconsin legislature's count of 1,182 names is almost certainly an undercount. By how much, no one can say. The deadliest fire in American history has no accurate body count. The fire burned the records that could have produced one. There are people buried in northeastern Wisconsin right now, this year today, whose names nobody knows, whose families never received confirmation of their deaths, whose lives exist in no document anywhere on Earth. The fire didn't just kill them, it erased them, and that erasure is still ongoing. The Great Chicago Fire is remembered because Chicago survived. It rebuilt, it documented itself. Its victims had names in newspapers and official reports and eventually monuments. The fire became a founding myth. Peshtigo had none of that. The people who could have told its story were dead. The records that could have named the dead had burned with them. History remembers what survives long enough to be written down. This is worth sitting with. We don't know the full death toll of the deadliest fire in American history. We don't know because the fire made sure we couldn't. In that gap, between what happened and what can be proved happened, are the names of hundreds of people who died on a Tuesday night in October 1871, while the country was looking 200 miles to the south. If this one kept you up tonight, good. New stories every day, Monday through Saturday. Subscribe so the next one finds you too. Follow the Unlit Room wherever you listen. Tell a friend who can't sleep. Full story on the main channel. Follow if you're wide awake. That was the Unlit Room. See you in the dark.